Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
The one thing that came up that we were speaking about a little bit earlier is about just kind of like tzniut generally, which is somehow a topic, tzniut being modesty, that we hadn't really talked about before, as now Ifat is working on this, from fashion line with Nitzan, and she talks about how she got, these, she convinced them to hire or to bring in from women to model the clothing rather than just having regular models modeling the from clothing. And in this scene in the episode, we have this person, just a regular person with kids and all of that, who's sort of, is much more natural modeling these clothing. Rabbi Barbara was saying before, it wasn't the most tznius outfit. It might have been a little low cut, So I think it raises questions, particularly in the kind of cool, hip, modern Orthodox world in which they're living, and particularly which Nitzan is trying to, create her mark in, related to what does modesty mean? Usually, modesty, tzniut, comes in primarily in conversations about clothing, which it obviously is more than that. And I think this, some of the questions here about is modeling to where there's pictures of you in, clothing that's intended to be attractive. Is that modest? Is right? Even the, designing the clothing, all this stuff, sort of how does modesty fit in? And particularly, who is when we talk about tzniut, modesty, sort of whose responsibility, right? Is it a responsibility of men or people attracted to women to not be looking at immodestly dressed women? Is it a responsibility of women to not dress immodestly? Is it sort of a responsibility on the community to ensure that everyone is dressed modestly? So I think those are some of the topics that we were sort of thinking about with regard to this episode, and sort of how modesty fits in to just the whole idea of even fashion and modeling and all of these things that Ifat is sort of entering a world in. Sort of how that fits with the idea of being a tzniut, or tzanua person, being a modest person. So that was sort of one of the main topics we were thinking about. Maybe Rabbi Schatz, if you have any thoughts of things that you wanted to add on that before we kind of dive in more.
I have a lot of thoughts, but I think that one of the things that tzniut generally, right? So when Rabbi Barbara said, I don't think the shirt was so tznius, I was thinking to myself, well, what does that mean, right? I think that when we define tzniut, we are often thinking about people dressing with their collarbones covered, their elbows covered, a skirt below their knee, maybe stockings, and if they're married, their head covered, right? For a woman, that's what tznius clothing looks like. Now, for a man, tznius clothing is just wearing clothes. So it seems to be a little bit unfair, because as long as a man has clothes on, he's all of a sudden now modestly dressed for the most part. Now, there's a lot of halachot around men's dress, especially if they're going to be a shaliach tzibur. So if they're going to stand in front of a community and lead davening, there's specific dress for that. But other than that, it's very much so kind of geared towards women. And I would venture to say that tzniut is not just about covering those body parts. It's about being modestly dressed and being dressed in such a way that you are a good reflection of both your body, but also, as cliche as it is, your soul, right? That you are showing a part of yourself on the outside that you would also want people to know about your insides. So when I wear clothes, right, I'm wearing pants right now, I don't feel as though I am any less Jewish or any less modest because I'm wearing pants currently. None of you can see that I'm wearing pants, so maybe in a certain way it doesn't matter, and now I've outed myself, but I wouldn't wear a skirt in front of all of you because I thought that was any more modest. I think that it comes down to how your clothes reflect who you are. And so for the woman, on the beach of Tel Aviv, wearing a shirt that maybe was lower than a modern Orthodox woman should be wearing, like, as long as she wasn't bending over and as long as she wasn't doing anything that would show parts of her body that should be covered, then like, sure, it was modest because everything that needed to be covered was covered. Now, even in just saying everything that needed to be covered was covered is a statement in and of itself in the 21st century, because there are tons of campaigns, especially in California, about dress and making sure that we don't tell women how to dress, and that if God forbid they're raped, that was because of the way they were dressed, or that women need to cover up in a certain way, but men don't have to, especially around like swimwear. So all of this comes into a lot of play here. And one of the ways that we've talked about it as a class is in terms of shul, right? That I've never worn pants in shul. In fact, on Shavuot, I thought, because we were up all night, I thought to myself, like, could I get away with wearing nice pants? And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wore a dress for 12 hours. And I think that that's like ingrained in our brain as being more tznius. But as Rabbi Pernick mentioned earlier in his class, that pants are no longer considered men's clothing. So that needs to kind of go away, but it's still in many of our specifically traditional realms of like shuls and temples, like spiritual practice spaces. That was a lot of things, but I guess what I'm trying to say, and Rabbi Pernick quoted me in saying this earlier, is that I don't think that tzniut is just about, does it go below your elbows? Does it go below your knees? Is it something that doesn't show off a lot of your clavicle? Right? Like, I think that it's more about how you are presenting yourself in the clothing that you are wearing, or in the way that you are presenting outwardly as a good reflection of who you want to be presenting as inwardly. And I stand by that.
I see Michael put a comment in the chat. Any thoughts or comments just about tzniut and the way you see it playing out in this episode, or ways that it's surprising or, even challenging? Like, one thing I'm thinking about is, right, this photo shoot is taking place at the beach in Tel Aviv, and so it's interesting. Like, at the beach in Tel Aviv, of course, this is very tznius relatively compared to other people at the beach in Tel Aviv. Whereas when it goes into a frum publication that's being read in, people in Jerusalem, suddenly that might seem less tzniut. There's sort of that cultural, the locale. That's something that, when you're at the beach, this is normal, but you wouldn't necessarily want, when the picture is taken and sort of shared in another context, it doesn't feel appropriate. Leonard and Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm remembering, I don't know, it was probably 30 years ago or so. I was at some event and I was talking to the Rebbitzin, the wife of the rabbi of one of the large Orthodox synagogues in town. And she was complaining, she did not cover her hair, and she was complaining about the young married women in her congregation who felt like they had to do that. And she thought that was ridiculous. So I just... it seems like what is considered, a requirement these days is different now than it was, in basically the same community that, is different now than it was a generation or two ago.
So she's saying the women don't cover their hair, and she felt like they had to.
No, exactly the opposite.
The opposite.
She did not cover her hair, and she couldn't understand why the young married women in her congregation thought that they needed to.
Right. I mean, and we saw that a little bit in the episode last week, in which, Nazi is going on a million dates, and there's this one woman who has her hair uncovered, and then it turns out she's married, and this woman's like, well, this is the agreement we made before our wedding, and he's like, well, now people think you're single, right? So there's sort of, I do think there's sort of a cultural component as well that, if you're in a place where married women cover their hair, or even if some married women start covering their hair and then others follow suit, like now it changes the context, where I think you're right that even in a modern Orthodox community, 40, 50 years ago, it was pretty common for women not to cover their hair in a way that's less so common today. And that's,
Also, just to the hair piece, a week and a half ago, something like that. Time is a weird thing after Shavuot, but I think it was a week and a half ago. I showed up to a meeting. I had just worked out with my trainer, and I showed up to a meeting because I didn't have time to shower in between, and I had a headband on. And every single person who I saw, both in the meeting and on my way to the meeting, said, "What are you from now?" And it's like there are certain things that come across as from or modest. If I wear a skirt that goes below my knees, that's like, below, most of my skirts go below my knees, but like below my knees, like in between my knee and my ankle, right? That's like kind of the more modern Orthodox look, that it's like a mid-calf, I guess is what you would call it. All of a sudden, every man that I see on the way to shul, Shabbat Shalom. Now, if I wear a regular dress and I see a bunch of men on my way to shul, they don't say Shabbat Shalom. So I know that there are certain looks that people see as from or more tznius than other looks. And at the same time, someone said this earlier, I won't continue to talk about myself. A person could wear a very tight fitting mid-calf dress, whatever, and that would be considered by halachic standards tznius, even though it's hugging every part of your body. Whereas if I wear pants, don't give me that. Yeah, that's true.
No,
it's true. But it's for sure true. I understand what you're saying, but like to the letter of the law, it is true. To the spirit of the law, it's not true. But to the letter of the law, it is, because it's covering all the parts that you're supposed to cover. But if I wear pants that are loose fitting, all of a sudden that's not tznius. So I do think that when we're talking about tzniut and just the things that people think of as modest, like hair covering, to Leonard's point, that sometimes they are also misconstrued as if you don't have those things on, you are not this way. And if you do have those things on, you are this way. And that's where a lot of this becomes stereotypical as opposed to like, I don't know, Jewishly connected, and more societally, accepted, I think.
Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it is just sort of, there's a cultural, and this comes to something Srugim was saying earlier about kind of like the when in Rome. Like there's this, certain ways in which our dress is like an identity marker. And even if it's not about like tzniut per se, saying, if you're wearing pants or you're wearing a head covering, or, even if it's an attractive head covering, it's more attractive than your hair, or it's a tight fitting dress, which is more form fitting than loose pants would be. There's sort of the identity piece that sort of marks you as, you're not covering your hair, so you're not part of this community, or you are covering your hair, so you are, right, even if it makes you look better. And then the question is that really about tzniut, or is it more about just sort of like marking your identity in some way? Yeah, Leonard and Rebecca.
You're muted.
Yeah, I don't know if I had talked about this before, but my daughter went to a modern Orthodox high school out here, and I remember thinking, should I be wearing a skirt to everything, whether it's a meeting or, concert or something, going on at the school. So in the beginning, I would wear skirts. But then I observed, it is interesting when you talk about it can really be a reflection of a lot of things, whether the woman's going to wear a skirt or pants. I noticed that a lot of the wives of the big machers, of the big shots, or the women who were, in not part of the staff, but the parents, they were the ones who would wear pants at these various meetings and events. It wasn't going to shul, it wasn't a service, but they would wear pants. And so I then, felt like, okay, I felt comfortable. I entered this comfort zone where, okay, I could wear pants to these various meetings and things too, because I saw that these women who, I knew were quite observant, they would wear pants in these settings. And it was almost like, I don't know, a power or a comfort thing, that you had to feel comfortable enough in this setting to go ahead and wear pants and know that you could, and it was going to be okay.
I just want to point out that I always wore pants as well.
Yeah. And I do remember years before, my cousin whose kids went to a community high school with Jewish high school, including sort of community, but including Orthodox and Chabad also went there. I remember that she would wear pants, and she would say that she was then part of this group, the mothers who wore pants and the ones who didn't. And it was kind of looked down upon, the ones who wore pants, and, oh, your mother wears pants, So it was like a dividing thing, but it was kind of almost like a political statement or something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that
the whole pants versus no pants is a real, it means more than you might think in some respects.
And I think the whole, I'm just because I know this is going out far and wide, I'm not going to share who, but there is a rabbi in our community whose wife is someone who wears pants during the week for her job. And then when she's at shul or at a function with her modern Orthodox rabbi husband, she wears a dress or a skirt, because she knows that that's, what in that community would be seen as respectful to the rest of the community. But she nor her husband have any problem with her wearing pants when that's the comfortable dress for her to be wearing for her job. And I think that you speak to a really important point, Rebecca, which is that not only is this something that we do as part of our tradition or as part of keeping our bodies as these holy vessels, but also as a way negatively at times of putting us in these groups, right? In these categories of who belongs where. And that's when I think the idea of tzniut just goes out the window. I would rather everybody wear whatever they want and be treated as great humans than, and this is what Rabbi Pernick quoted me saying earlier, than have people wearing, quote, the right dress and not be treated well or not treat others well, because then what's the point in wearing tznius clothing if you're not going to be a good person and you're going to judge others based on what they're wearing?
I think one thing I'm also thinking about, because there's a lot of thought and conversation about tzniut as it relates not just to clothing, but sort of to social media and sort of what you put out there about yourself. And I'm even thinking about this woman with her 2 kids, and that's part of the photo shoot is this is a clothing for parents and mothers and whatnot, and yet seeing that I think makes Yifat feel jealous about seeing this sort of beautiful family, and it makes her I wish my life was looked like that, and I had these beautiful kids running to me, and so I think there's an interesting component of tzniut there, which of course Yifat's the one who said we should have real frum women rather than just models who are faking it. But then there's also not that it's not tznius that this woman is there with her 2 kids. That's part of the photo shoot. But thinking more broadly about the impact of when we talk about what we wear and it makes people think or feel. I think the same thing, then often you can think about what pictures we put out about ourselves and how, you're putting out a picture of everything being beautiful and perfect, right? Which most people do on social media. And then people who are feeling down, it's sort of I'm not, my life is terrible compared to them because look how perfect everything is, so I think there's an element of tzniut there as well. Padre, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just moving around. So going back a minute or two, I was thinking not specifically with tzniut, but I was introduced to this maybe 20 years ago. We had a district attorney in our county who was Orthodox, and he didn't wear a kippah. And subsequently, I learned about the halachic ruling that if wearing a kippah might be considered to be problematic in terms of your career, then it's halachically acceptable for you not to wear the kippah. while you're at your job. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we're able to bend the tradition or bend the halakha in a sense like that, then once again, I have to agree with Rabbi Schatz that, some of these barriers that we place are really kind of artificial.
But also keep in mind that a kippah is not halachic. It's just a minhag, right?
It's a minhag, but it's a very strong minhag. I mean, try to go to an Orthodox shul without observing that minhag.
Right. I mean, I think it's a minhag, but more as the identity marker, right? As opposed to like covering your knees and your elbows, where there's the halachic conversation, right? He says they often bend in a way that works for men. Yeah, sure. But I think that one, the head covering is sort of a way of marking your identity, but there's no, concern of erva or nakedness if your head is for a man if his head is uncovered. For women, but for a woman there is.
For a woman, if her head is uncovered, it is erva.
Yeah, true.
And I think that there is some sign there, right? Just like the story that I told about as soon as I put a headband on my face, everyone was like, "Oh, you're from all of a sudden." Right, that there are signs that if you're wearing a kippah, it's similar to if you're wearing a long, 3/4 length shirt and calf length skirt. I mean, that tells you something about a person without even meeting them. You know who they are. I mean, unfortunately in Los Angeles, last night there was this terrible attack at people sitting at a sushi restaurant, and it wasn't because they were sitting there waving Israeli flags. It was because they looked Jewish. So there are ways in which you show your outward Judaism. And so I agree with your dad, not surprisingly.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, there's just sort of the broader questions about like, what is modesty, right? If modeling clothes that are right, the whole idea of modeling is that you're wearing clothing that's intended to make people look at the pictures and say, oh, that's what I want. Like that, whether it's because there's the kids and the pretty in the beach and right, like that's the whole idea of modeling is that you're seducing, as it were, not like necessarily men, usually it's women who are going to be buying it, but there's a whole idea of trying, right, getting these pictures that look glamorous. So like, I think I tried to look up earlier and see if I could find anything about just like modeling and what, whether there's conversations about whether that's sanua, which I didn't find, but I think it is interesting to think about like, right, if the whole idea is to sort of make yourself, like put an image of yourself out there that makes people want to emulate you in your dress, I think there's like questions about whether that's sanua or not. I don't know. Perhaps. Or perhaps not.
Well, I think that it also it leads to how we represent ourselves outwardly in general, right? That if a person is to dress a certain way, or tattoos often go into this category, right? If people are to have piercings or tattoos, or they're often there have been so many studies done that if someone has tattoos on their face, are you going to stereotype them as a criminal as opposed to another person who doesn't have tattoos on their face? And the human psyche goes straight to yes. And that's unfair, but it's based again on outward appearance, because we associate a type of clothing, a type of appearance, a type of outward look to certain kinds of people. And the same is true in Judaism. I mean, think about if you're in Jerusalem, you can go from one part of Jerusalem to the other part of Jerusalem and know exactly where you are, even if you have no sense of direction, based on how the clothing changes. I mean, you walk into Mea Sharim and you're no longer on Ben Yehuda. So, and that's not because you know anything deeply about Judaism, but the dress changes. And so you have an awareness of who the people are that are around you. And that to me, yes, it stems from modesty, but I don't know that that's what it is today. Now it's how we define people.
So we should all go around with clown noses on.
With clown noses, yeah.
Yeah, that way.
You first. Norm.
I knew a woman who did not like having a sheitel, didn't own one, but she used to cover her hair with a tickle all the time. Her hair was very short underneath it, and but she got a job in a bank, and they told her, you can't be wearing this scarf all the time. We don't want it. So she went out and bought herself a sheitel, and she wore that when she was going to work all the time. And she felt like it was a significant compromise because she had to at work. But I also think that there's no question, you look at somebody and you have a sense of they're dressed like this or they're dressed like that. And I told my children 30 years ago that when they come to Glendale, they shouldn't wear a yarmulke, and which is the town where I work. And it's really funny because there was one day I was driving Stevie someplace to pick up a car, and we crossed the city line to Glendale, and the yarmulke was gone, and I was just amazed because I hadn't thought of it for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeff.
A number of years ago, I was teaching freshman medical students, and the high holidays were coming. And one of my colleagues, after Yom Kippur, a non-Jewish colleague, asked me about a certain student, and a Jewish student. And I said, "Well, what's the question?" Well, she was out during the holidays. She stayed out of school. I said, "Yeah." Well, did you know she had tattoos? And I said, I don't remember if I noticed or not. Well, he was a Catholic fellow, but he thought because she had tattoos and she couldn't have been very observant, and therefore staying out of school was kind of fraudulent, I started looking it up about tattoos. And I found out that, well, again, there was nothing hard and fast anymore about tattoos. And about a month later, in the local Jewish, the Southern Jewish Life magazine we get down here, there was an article about the son of our cantorial soloist at our Reformed synagogue, who was covered with tattoos. I just thought it was a funny juxtaposition. But basically, my colleague, just assumed that the girl with tattoos couldn't be really religious, and she shouldn't have skipped school that day. And that was just kind of a interesting thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes such a stereotypical way of understanding people and assuming that if someone's in a black hat with a long beard and tzitzit, that they must be extremely righteous. Well, it's not always true.
Or they must be Jewish and not a missionary Christian, pretending to be a Jew.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
Norm.
I'm amazed about the Yom Kippur aspect because I would think almost everybody who has any awareness of Jews knows that that's a holiday that's widely observed by people who don't observe very much of halacha.
Right.
I think there's things that, it's been interesting to see the things that people assume. Like there was a funeral here a couple of weeks ago and someone who had, donated his organs, and a number of clients of mine at this funeral who went with non-Jewish coworkers were like, I thought Jews don't do that. That comes back to Judy and I were talking about this, series we're going to do in the fall about organ donation. But even though it was not an Orthodox guy, but there is still sort of this sense of wait, I thought he was Jewish. Don't Jews not do that? And it's no. So it's interesting to think what people think are oh, that's what Jews do or Jews don't do.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's maternal grandfather, after he came to America, ended up eventually in the wholesale toy business in the late 40s and in the 50s. He once had a potential customer come to him and try and make an appointment for Yom Kippur, which was one of very few days that he took off for religious reasons. And he explained to this person that he couldn't make the appointment that day, but he could make it on some other day. And little did he know, this guy was considering him and another wholesaler, also Jewish, who said, yes, I'll meet you that day. And he ended up coming to my grandfather-in-law because he said, I can't trust a Jew he was not Jewish. I can't trust a Jew who works on Yom Kippur. And he became a significant customer for many years, is how I'm told it.
Just for sake of time, is there any other topic that jumped out at you from this episode that you either wanted to bring up or you wanted to hear more about or you had a question about? We could stay on Tzniut for forever, but if you wanted to ask something else, because it's already 7. Yes, Rabbi Pernick is very excited to talk about Shabbos lamb. So if anybody else is very excited about that, I will say, and you can all
After being told how there was no halachic topics in this episode, I
didn't say there were no halachic topics. I just said there's not anything fun to talk about, is what I said. And Shabbos lamb goes into the category of not so fun. Okay, Denise.
I thought Ro'i and, telling Ro'i this isn't working, it just made me wonder, is he gonna be more accepting of his own sexuality? Did the event when they were at the Springs and he was checking out that guy, did that just make him feel like, okay, and I also kept wondering, are those two guys gay? Is something going to happen? Is it, I just didn't know where it was going to go. I mean, I have a feeling Roy was having those same kinds of questions. Mm-hmm. But it just made me think, I wonder if he's giving himself more permission.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, without giving anything away, I'll just say it's an interesting part of the storyline, and it'll be interesting to see what comes next. I think that when you see Rayut get so upset, my first instinct was to say to her, you did this to yourself, lady friend. You knew that this was a possibility. You also knew that he was never going to 100% be into you, as we colloquially say. And to decide that you were going to still continue with this relationship, it was a risk that she was willing to take for sure, but she has to take a little bit of responsibility in knowing that in taking that risk, she also knew that there was a chance that he was going to say, the feelings that I have for men are taking over, and it's not fair to you for me to be with you. And I'm kind of glad that it's over, because I think that as you continue to see this relationship, she was really trying to force something that she thought she could make perfect, and quote, fix into making perfect. Why'd you say episode 14 to me?
Sorry, I think I was responding to Michael.
Oh, okay. So I think that's something that, you're right, that he might be trying to figure himself out, but also it's about time that they both be realistic and kind of accepting of the fact that this was never going to work to begin with.
Yeah.
So I haven't been with you guys for a few weeks, and I think I'm still a week behind because.
And we've missed you a lot.
Well, I've missed you, but I've been just extra. We've got we got babies, we got weddings, we put our roof on our house today.
Different households of the weddings.
Different
and the
households, correct? Yeah. Let's clarify that exactly. It's been really
coming before the wedding.
But the baby is coming before the wedding, which is why that was important to clarify.
Correct. The weddings, yeah. But so I think I'm an episode behind. Because you were talking about things. I told Josh last night, I don't know what you're going to talk about other than maybe saying Kaddish can you say Kaddish for a pet?
Right. Yeah, so interesting.
So we're clearly behind. And so, it's okay that you've revealed it. It's all right. But what I was going to say is that I think in any romantic relationship, as well as in any employment relationship, there's always an element of risk. I mean, I'm married to Josh's mom for 37 and a half years, and I still don't understand her. Okay. No, I mean, I do. But I mean, it's there's always, you never get to the point, and I think this is true in work as well, that you think, oh, this is going to be a good job or this is going to be a good fit. But there's always a certain leap of faith that you take. You think the odds are pretty good, but there's learning that needs to take place. But I would agree that the people that we're seeing in terms of their understanding of homosexuality, they just seem so naive and so, I mean, I know the series is maybe 12, 13 years old, but I'm still I don't know if that's more the Israeli angle or if it's how much society has progressed in a decade or more, but it's just, it just seems very, very old fashioned.
I also think that it seems old fashioned, but I think that still in not just the modern Orthodox world, but in some communities, you try, especially when your brother and your father and your community are trying to get you to feel like, oh, this is just a phase, you'll be totally fine. You psych yourself into imagining, well, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe I also can be as attracted to women as I am to men, or, if you're a woman, as attracted to men as I am to women. But ultimately, I think, as Denise pointed out, like in that moment of seeing these other men, just made him realize that it's just never going to be the same. He might really love Rayut as a person and as a friend, but he's never going to be as attracted to her, whether that's just sexually or physically, whatever it is, as he was to the men who he was seeing when they were on this tiyul. So I think
I don't know. I think it was pretty clear that he had lost interest before the tiyul.
100%. But I think that's what like solidified it, and we as the audience saw in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I would just want to add though one last thing. And again, I haven't seen the episode, but I think I always tell people that in terms of a successful marriage or even relationship, it's not necessarily the passionate part that's going to make or break the relationship. I say it's more important to like the person than to love the person. Because that passion that, you sometimes feel at the beginning of a relationship, I think you'd die if you had that 12 months a year, for 20 years or whatever. It's too much. No, really. I mean, it's just, you need things to just kind of like calm down so you're in a good...
Yeah.
I was making that face to your son, not to you. Yeah,
The things that make a marriage work are not that passion that drives you crazy. That's not, it's good. But it's not.
I've never been married, but what I hear from my own parents as well is they're best friends. And that doesn't always mean that everything is romantic, but at the end of the day, they want to spend time together because they really like being around each other and they're each other's best friend. And I think that that's partially what Rayut was seeing in this, which was, oh, this is a person who I really love as a friend. And I think it was Lisa who just said, though now I'm not remembering, that, maybe I'll just change him to fall in love with me, or maybe I'll make him a little bit more like the way that I need him to be so that he will be a good partner to me, because this friendship is so great that it must turn into something that will be romantic and partnership in the future. Yeah. Other thoughts? By the way, I will just say that I knew that you were on the wrong episode, because when I mentioned to the other Rabbi Pernick that I didn't know what we were going to talk about today, he said that you suggested yahrzeit for a pet. I mean, Kaddish for a pet, or I guess maybe also a yahrzeit for a pet. And I said, that was last week's episode. And he said, okay, yeah, maybe. And I knew it. All right. Other thoughts, questions?
Just to add on to the Rayut relationship. When she bought the present for the wedding, for them, it was sort of identifying them as a couple.
Yeah, totally.
And you could see him recoil, like, we're not a couple. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm inviting you to the wedding. In fact, I don't think I was going to.
Right.
And, but it was this topic that was in the air. Of course, you would take your girlfriend to the wedding.
Right.
Yeah, again, I think that she was trying to make something happen that wasn't going to happen in his mind. And that was kind of the push that made him realize, oh, she's thinking this is going in one direction and it's going in another for me. And so I need to put an end to it. This is your opening, Rabbi Pernick, to talk about Shabbos lamps if you want to. So do you want to?
Shabbos lamps.
That's all you're going to say?
Yeah, they're good gifts.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
I mean,
one of my rabbis in yeshiva is the inventor of the shabulb, which is a light bulb that functions like a Shabbos lamp. So you don't need a separate lamp. You can just plug in this light bulb. They sell them at Kosher Cajun, which was very exciting for me when I moved down.
There's also a very cool Shabbos lamp that you can just turn the contraption on the top. I think it's called a coat. I don't know what it's called. And the lamp is always on. The things that we define as cool and exciting in this podcast, man.
Shabulbs are pretty cool, I gotta say.
Great. And you turn the tent contraption thing so that you can see the light or you don't see the light. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
That's a Shabbos lamp.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just describing that you can also have the turny kind. They're not always turny.
I think they are.
Okay. Well, this is why we didn't talk about this as a whole topic, because now it's over. That was it. Shabbos lamps. There you go. Any other really fun topics that everyone wants to discuss?
Well, there was a funny, when I was watching this episode with this very close eye to see if anything out. There's an interesting thing when they're at the lake and when Ru'ud has her feet in the water and she's talking about how cold it is and what's his name? Roi says something about HaTorah nichnet b'Yisurim, the Torah is acquired through Yisurim, through hardships. And then she responds with a Talmudic line. I thought that was funny, but there wasn't really anything more to say there. So that was better.
Nati was very human this week. That is true. He
saw patients. This is the first time that we actually saw him with a patient.
Is that true?
Doctoring.
I don't think that's true, but you're a lovely guy.
It's the first time we saw him actually doctoring, with a stethoscope, treated
No.
Anyway,
he says no. Wait, Michael, when else?
Well, the first time he met the clown,
right?
And there've been at least a couple of others. He had the friend.
But his hands weren't on a patient. He was in the room with a patient. But that was the first time his hands were actually on.
It's such a minor point. We're not going to. But I believe if
hands were not on a patient.
Leave it at that.
I had a congregant who was watching Srugim, but who doesn't come to this class, and he texted me when he was watching Srugim, he was like, "We made it to the second to last episode of season 2, and for the first time, Nati actually is has his hands on a patient." It's so.
But is he still eligible bachelor number 4?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that he dialed it all back this week. He understood that to potentially get what he wanted from both the relationship and also his professional life, though I do think he has seen patients before, maybe not touched them, but seen them before, that he had to kind of take a little bit of his own ego and his own self out of things. And then, what's her face? Daphna, is that her name? She said, I have to think about it. And he kind of, for the first time, realized, okay, this isn't just about me. Now I've put something out there. She's going to think about it and we'll see what happens. So I think he's maturing very slowly, but I think he's maturing. And touching patients, which is great.
He actually seemed like a good doctor. Other than the telling them to say things,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was exciting.
Anything else? Hodaya seems to be a very good teacher, which I just want to point out. It's lovely that she seems to have a thing that she can do. She seems to be a lovely teacher. Rebecca and Leonard.
Oh.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. What do you want to say?
No, go ahead, Rebecca and Leonard.
Oh, no, please, Rabbi.
I was just going to comment on next week as the last episode. That's all I was going to say.
Not of the whole series.
No, but of this.
There's one more episode for season 2.
Right.
But I just wanted to point out, because I think it was impossible to capture in the subtitles, but there was a funny play on words in the show over there, where he was telling whoever it was, Roi, to go to Ein Sarig. And he says, Ein Sarig Basin. In other words, he wanted to know how it was spelled, whether it was with a sin or a samach. But sin also means China.
Oh, I missed that one.
Right. And so he said, no, it's not in China, it's in Siberia. The English had made no sense at all, but if you understood any of the Hebrew, it was actually pretty funny.
I missed that. I caught the story one. I missed that. Yeah.
The translation said it's not in Siberia, it's in Israel. And I'm like,
right. There you go. Okay.
Anything else?
Translation's not always 100% perfect.
Well, certain things just don't translate, so So do the best you can. Okay, everyone.
So next week is the last episode of this season, and we'll see what happens. You don't have to wait a whole summer to watch the next season, but hope that you have a great week, a safe week in all of the places you live, and see you soon.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.